Um, my name is Hope Stricknell. I'm the chair of the Canaan Electric Aggregation Committee. We are here today to do the second of the public hearings for the electric aggregation plan. And today we have Andrew Hatch from the New Hampshire Coalition for Community Power, who will be presenting the plan and basically talking a bit about community power, what it does, and answering any questions that anybody may have. And we're here to also hear any kind of feedback that anybody has on the community power plan for Canaan, and listen to thoughts and suggestions. So anyways, thank you, and I welcome to the people on Zoom.
Thank you very much, Hope. Is this okay if I wander around? I'm going to get picked up on the mic. Okay, great. Great. Well, as Hope said, my name's Andrew Hatch. I'm the engagement manager for CPCNH, and thank you for coming this afternoon to this second of the required public hearings as you, Canaan, are moving forward through the process of considering creating Canaan Community Power. Everybody should have a copy of the slide deck that is also on the screen here to take away. And I'm going to just run through this as it sort of explains the background for those not familiar, and then gets into what Canaan's currently engaged in and where things are at. And then there'll be plenty of opportunity for Q&A. But don't be shy. If you want to ask a question during the presentation, just flag it and I will be happy to talk with you. So again, what is community power? So back in 2019, the legislature considered it in the public interest to adopt community power in the state of New Hampshire through RSA 53E. And what that essentially does is allow cities, towns, and counties to become the default electricity provider and replace that role of the utilities. But we are talking specifically about energy supply, not distribution. So your utilities that serve the town of Canaan are responsible for maintaining the poles and the wires and the billing process, and they will continue to do that. For a long time, since electricity deregulation of 20 years ago, we have all been able to procure our electricity supply from other third parties. And in fact, the people that wrote that law had the vision that by now, most of us would be doing that. But that has not been the case for a variety of reasons. And people aren't necessarily aware of those options. And community power has grown fairly quickly since that 2019 bill passed. And Community Power Coalition is in the process of helping its community members to launch community power. And I'll explain where we are in a few minutes. There is a lot more to the concept of community power than just saving money, but the basic premise is that we can operate in the competitive marketplaces more effectively than the utilities can, and can pass on savings to customers while providing people a lot more choice and a lot more additional value-added programs. If you could go to the next slide, please. The idea of local control is the cornerstone of community power. The lower cost piece is because we say in the plan, the Canaan Community Power Electric Aggregation Plan, that Canaan Community Power will only launch for a customer whose residential rates are higher than those of the coalition. So you can't, by the arrangements of this plan, suffer from a higher rate by being switched across to community power. As importantly, it's a completely voluntary program. Folks aren't forced into the program per se, but what we're doing is creating that sort of critical mass where people don't have to act. They can be enrolled into community power without taking action. If they really don't want to be involved, they can opt out, and we try and make that process as easy as possible. The clean energy piece will become more evident when I talked about how our rates are set and what we do in terms of providing higher levels of renewable content to our customer base. But that's a very much an important part of the whole program. And then the resilience and innovation, the whole idea behind that is that during the time of the investor-owned utilities in particular, their primary goal is to make sure that they return a guaranteed return on investment to their shareholders. And the investment that's required in perhaps leveraging innovation and making that available to ratepayers is certainly of secondary importance. And in this state, we have not seen the adoption of a lot of contemporary technologies. One of the things you may have heard of, time of use rates, where if you have the right kind of meter and the right kind of rate options, you could manage your electricity more economically at times of day when the grid is less under stress, and savings, rewards for you to do that would be passed back to you. But you basically need the equipment in order for that to happen, and that has typically not been actioned by the utilities, and we are in the process of advocating for that. There are many other ideas in terms of technologies that are forthcoming, and we are a member-driven organization, and we're really only getting some momentum now. So a lot of the things that are starting to emerge beyond being able to save our members money are still in the planning stage. But I'll elaborate a little bit about some of the things we did in the last year. So just to sort of summarize, when a community power program launches, most customers who are on default power, so I know in Canaan you have more than one utility. Who in the room here is on Liberty? The folks who are on the co-op? Okay. So they're differently run, and there's different rates and so forth. But in both of these cases, those utilities would continue to be the folks that provided you with the uptime. They'd be the people you called if there was an outage, and they would be responsible for taking care of that. But if you are receiving your power from them, then the program of community power would mean you would be automatically enrolled in the local Canaan community power when that happened. But it is voluntary, as I said before. There's a lot of effort put into giving people the chance to opt out in a very simple fashion if they so choose. And the utility continues to be responsible for delivering the electricity. Are anybody in the room with a third-party supplier today, somebody other than your utility? Well, some people are, and anybody in that situation would not be moved across and enrolled in community power unless they opted into the program, because we don't know what their arrangements are with their contract, whether there's any penalty to exit, what rates they're receiving. But they could opt in, and many do, but that's something that they would have to take the choice to act on. And finally, community power is completely self-funded from the revenues received by the participating ratepayers. So anybody that chooses not to participate in the program is not impacted, and there's no tax burden to the town of Canaan, so nobody is actually subsidizing this program. Next slide, please. Jumping ahead to a time in the future when Canaan would be ready to launch, what happens is that we would be sending out, the coalition would be sending out enrollment letters at least 30 days prior to the program starting to launch. So what this explains in some considerable detail is what the rates are, what your options are, and indeed folks who might not automatically be enrolled, such as those third-party folks. Another category of folks who would not automatically enroll right now are net metering customers, and I'll touch on why, but those sort of folks have all the Q&As answered in here. How do you get in touch with the coalition? What do you do? And invites you along to a public information session that would have to take place within 15 days of those letters going out, telling everybody you have a window. There's a date by which if you act and choose not to participate, you won't be enrolled, and explaining just how the whole program works. And making sure that people realize that there's no fee to exit, and there's no restriction on them being able to opt back in with no fee at a time in the future. Next slide, please. So each bill from each utility is slightly different. Nothing much changes with community power in terms of a billing, but if you're a Liberty customer, they would say you have chosen community power to be electricity supply. And then over on electricity supply, you would see the prevailing rate for community power instead of the rate that you would have been paying through the utility. But other than that, the delivery charges, all the other side of the bill is completely the responsibility of the utility. We don't have any involvement on how those rates are set. In Liberty's case, that's between them and approval by the Public Utilities Commission. Next slide, please. And if you were a co-op customer, again, similar thing happens. Under supplier charges, it would say community power, and again, the rate would be the multiplier on the rate that you've either defaulted into or opted up to, and you would be responsible for paying the co-op, and the co-op would reimburse the coalition. So there's no double billing or anything such as that. Everything that is done in terms of decision making is based upon when your meter is read. Everybody's meter is read at a different time of the month. So if you got in touch with us, within a few days of notice of a billing period in advance of that, we would let the utility know. They would change their records, and you would be moved back onto their power, onto another third party, or a change of a rate with community power. So we communicate directly on your behalf with the utility. We have a call center. So if you are not comfortable with using the internet, you can call an 800 number and speak to a human being about this. There are people who are well versed in community power. They understand how to talk and help you. They have an escalation process. If there's a question that they can't answer, they will get somebody, including people like myself, to get back directly in touch. You will also, Canaan would have a portal, as we call it, on a website that we would manage at communitypowernh.gov. You can go and look at the examples of those right now. There's over 60 communities listed. Each one has a slightly different look and feel based upon who is serving you as a utility and what the rates in play are, but they're all basically the same idea. And on that portal, all you need to do is have your account number to hand, and you could express your interest in a change that way, or indeed a simple email to the coalition will also start the ball rolling. So we try and make it as easy as possible. Okay, next slide, please. So getting on to electricity choices, this as what I was talking about just a moment ago, communitypowernh.gov is the site that we maintain on behalf of our members. There would be a communitypowernh.gov/Canaan, as and when Canaan was going to launch. And everybody is encouraged to contact our call center and or get in touch via the web. On the right here are the current rates in play. Down at the bottom are the utility rates, and above are the coalition's rates. And the blue line here shows a granite basic, and it says under that default power option. A vast majority of our members choose to pass on as much savings as possible to their ratepayers, and they elect to have the granite basic as their default product. The green ones above are higher levels of renewable electricity, and that's something that the community members, the individual ratepayers, would choose to opt up to. So again, you get in touch in whichever way you were comfortable with doing and express your interest in moving up to and including 100% renewable energy. As you can see on the right-hand side, there's rough estimates of how much per month it would cost you to as a consumer for Granite Basic. It's given as an example of $56 a month. That's based upon the consumption of an average consumer. And our average is 650 kilowatt hours a month. You'd have to do your own math to figure out if you're in that sort of ballpark. But this is at least a sort of industry standard apples and apples comparison. So as you can see, for a couple of bucks a month, $3 or $4 a month there, you can move up to a higher level of renewables, if you so chose. What we do in the real world to actually assist in the higher renewable, the electricity doesn't know what level of renewables it is. It all comes through as electrons. The idea in the state of New Hampshire is that the renewable content, the minimum content, has to be 24.3%, or in fact, that was the 2024 rate. I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail in a minute. And that is what everybody, all electricity has to meet that renewable content level. But opting up is an action that we satisfy using RECs, renewable energy certificates or credits. We choose to purchase those renewable energy certificates that benefit businesses in New Hampshire, or at the very least New England, and not other parts of the country. We feel that that is in the true spirit of renewable energy generation promotion. With those funds actually go to assist those renewable energy generators to stay in business, frankly. Below, we have the rates from the four utilities, and every year they are reset. So we're just in the process of a new rate period that will come into force at the beginning of February. But until the end of January, this is where everybody is. And you can see with Liberty was at almost 11 cents a kilowatt hour versus 8.6. So quite a delta there. On that estimate basis, a Liberty customer would be saving $15 a month or something. So not an insignificant amount of money, but that varies, and it'll become evident in a moment. And if you could flip to the next slide. Since I was here in December, the new rate periods have started to be set. So during the month of December, Liberty, Unitil, Eversource, and the Co-op announced new rates. You'll see that number 25.2. That's what I was referring to, that the minimum renewable content in New Hampshire has clicked up a little to 25.2. Unless the state legislature changes that, it's going to flatline at 25.2% for the future. But we're still maintaining 33, 50, and 100% renewable content up and above that. So our new rate is currently set for February the 1st through July 31st of 8.9. So just gone up by a fraction of a cent. So our customers would be paying $58 a month, a couple of dollars more than in this current period. On the left-hand side, though, you'll see that Liberty's rate has gone down to 8.416. And you'll realize that that is actually 0.5% or just shy of a 0.5% more cheaper than the Granite Basic. And I'll explain why in a moment. And the Co-op, even slightly lower than that. This is a circumstance of power procurement that has quite a lot of nuance to it. Until now, the investor-owned utilities, those are the top three, not the New Hampshire Electric Co-op, have all been charged with the responsibility of procuring default power in a manner in which their rates are locked in through the purchase through a third party who takes all of the risk. If that rate was insufficient to cover the actual cost of power, because I don't know how many folks in the room are aware, but while I've been standing here, the cost of power has probably changed half a dozen times. It's not, the cost of power is nothing to do with 8.9 cents. That's just a number that is set by the coalition and the numbers set by the utilities. The intention of default power, as I said earlier, was a backstop, a last resort perhaps, but more importantly, your utility is a monopoly. You don't have a choice. When you come to Canaan, where you live determines who your utility is. And when and if you want electricity that you don't generate off the grid, you have to tie to the grid through your utility. And the whole restructuring conversation that happened many years ago recognized that monopoly situation and set a requirement that the utilities would not be able to profit from the procurement of power supply. They would be responsible for poles and wires and maintaining the uptime. So that's why they're called distribution utilities. And so the idea is that the utilities would procure power at the best rate they could find and pass it through to their customers. The Public Utilities Commission, who oversees the investor-owned utilities, has seen it fit to instruct those utilities to experiment with putting more of the procurement process on at risk, if you will, on the spot market, as it's called. We're not, and I want to be clear here, the coalition procures power in the competitive market, but we are not exposed to the spot market. We are maintaining through our own rules of engagement and policies, power in many different lengths of contract over time to get the lowest rates, but also protect those rates by what we call hedging and things like that. This is pure speculation. This is that rate's good until it isn't. And there are many conversations around what happened in a fairly high profile problem in Texas a few years ago, where people who are in an unfettered marketplace, who ended up paying thousands of dollars a day for a brief period of time just to maintain their power. I'm not suggesting it's quite as extreme as that, but it is somewhat, it's a complete game change. I would hasten to say that from everything I've heard, the utilities aren't particularly on board with it. It's the Utility Commission that's instructed them to experiment with this. And as in the best infomercials, but wait, there's more. What the PUC have said is that if for some reason those rates that are procured are insufficient to cover the actual cost of that power that's been procured, the reconciliation that goes on at the end of a rate period will mean that if anything has been undercollected, that burden for collection will be, this is a popular word in the utility world, socialized across all ratepayers on your delivery side of your bill through a little line item called stranded cost recovery. I still find it hard to speak at this point, because what may not be evident to people who aren't spending their life in this field is that what's actually been done is that it basically says, go out and procure power at the best rate you can go, put it out on the bill, and if the worst happens, never mind, we've got a way to cover everybody. But the people that have decided not to participate in that, community power customers, other third-party suppliers, they'll all have to pick up the tab. Now, I don't know about you, but I just don't think that that's particularly appropriate, and it's certainly anti-competitive. And it has caught the attention of our legislators. And just an hour before I came here, I can speak to this, but I can't retain it in my mind. Representatives Jason Osborne and Keith Ammon have both picked up on a legislative service request about this and are taking steps to expedite this, whatever legal language may be used, to object to this at the legislature. As you know, today is the first day that our new legislators are sitting down and getting their head around over 1,000 bills and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of noise, and I'm not suggesting I know how fast and what's going to happen. I'm just saying that our legislators are also very concerned about this. So I'm just putting that out there for the good people of Canaan, just because we are, as a non-profit governmental entity, a transparent organization, and we're doing our best to operate under our own rules of engagement, which we consider responsible, in a marketplace that is being destabilized by action that was unanticipated. So I'm not necessarily sort of setting this up to say much more about this, other than as we stand here today, our new rates will not be able to beat those of Liberty and the New Hampshire Electric Co-op. And I don't want to be trite by saying, but not by much, because $4 or $5 for some of us is the difference between a meal on the table. And I'm certainly not here today to suggest that's not a substantial effect. And it's not the intention of the coalition to burden any of its ratepayers. But we have to act responsibly and make sure that we ourselves are acting by our own rules and regulations to ensure our longevity. I might pause there because this is happening by the hour. I'm not exaggerating. And you are the second group that I have presented this issue to this week. And I'm very interested to hear, did what I just say make any sense? How do you feel? Is it clear?
This
Yes, Mr.
means
Van
that we couldn't adopt community power at this time because it would be more expensive than the Liberty rate. Is that correct?
You're absolutely right. So if we were standing here today with a view to, moving as fast as Canaan can to launch community power, and if we were hypothetically in a position to offer a launch in this rate period through the end of July, Canaan would not be able to launch. It would be on deck, but it would not be able to launch, which is important to stress that that's hypothetical and it's premature because we're here today to discuss the process that has not yet been adopted in order to Canaan to have that choice. But I just, from a transparency point of view, want to lay it all out because this is going to be an interesting time. The coalition chooses to set its rates in lockstep to the rate setting periods of the utilities to be transparent and provide apples and apples. There is another way of doing community power, and that's through a third-party broker. A third-party broker would purchase the power on behalf of the town of Canaan. It would offer the select board the opportunity to decide between 2 or 3 contracts that have different lengths, and there would be a fixed rate. And that's been done by 7 communities in New Hampshire so far. And I'm not in any way disparaging that choice, but the anticipation 2 years ago was that markets would be volatile. We were coming off of the back of the extreme rise in costs because of the problems with the war in Ukraine and the high price of natural gas. And in fact, what was sent out to your committee was this, and you can definitely take a copy of this home with you. This little chart here shows these blue boxes are the ranges of the rates from the utilities, and the black line is where the coalition has. We launched right in the crazy time when I think Liberty was probably the highest rate at 25, 26 cents a kilowatt hour. And that was just for residential customers. Some commercial customers went up to 40 and 44 cents momentarily. So that was that sort of rate volatility time. And we came in and set 16, and then we've come down and down. And we've maintained a discount against the utilities until this rate, the lowest always. But this one, because of the externalities that I've just explained, we don't feel we're in a position to take a race to the bottom, but we're staying in the ballpark. That broker line, if I'd drawn it, has left those communities with a large delta in the 3 cent kilowatt hour rate is what they're facing now. So that's quite a big difference between that or, fractions of a penny. So, we are applying this differently. It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, but Canaan would not be adversely affected by that. And I would be working with Canaan. We would be looking to work with Canaan to take a very strong and judicious look as this all plays out as to timing in terms of the launch. The next slide, please. So back to where we are today. The implementation process is in the middle of where we are. So you formed the committee, your select board has signed what's called the Joint Powers Agency, meaning that you've stepped into joining the coalition. We provide all the resources available to make this as easy a process as possible. And your electric aggregation committee has been doing the research and has developed this draft electric aggregation plan, which is available on the town website. And this will need to be submitted to the Public Utilities Commission once the draft has been completed and the public hearing, the second of which is today, have been conducted. And the Public Utilities Commission will be responsible for approving it from their side of the fence. And at the same time, Canaan will be moving forward with a town meeting warrant article with a view to getting a vote of a majority of the legislative body of Canaan to approve and move forward with community power. What the actual terms of your warrant article will be, I believe, are still, up for a conversation, but I will stress that what you will be asked to do will be something to the effect of approving the select board to move forward at their discretion. And what you'll actually be approving, this says, can I read this? Hope you're comfortable enough with it?
The one that
you
I
sent
sent
me?
you guys?
Yeah.
Sure.
So we feel this is good. This is what's gone in front of your select board, but I don't think it's been approved yet. To see if the town will vote to adopt the Canaan Community Power Plan, which is the electric aggregation plan I've talked about, to authorize the select board to implement the plan and take all actions in furtherance thereof pursuant to RSA 53E. The Canaan Community Power Plan is an opt-out, non-profit energy procurement program that pools the electricity demand of participating customers to increase buying power and expand local control and benefits. The plan will initially provide lower electricity rates for residents, or it will not launch. Initial participation in the plan can be declined, after which enrollment becomes voluntary. This program is self-funded and no taxpayer funds are used to cover the program expenses. So that's essentially what's going to be probably on the warrant this year. And once you get to that point, you have done the work of the town. I'll be right with each other. The role of the select board then would be to enter into the contracts that are required between the coalition and the town. They're called cost-sharing agreements. And what that means is it just lays out in very clear words what responsibilities the town has, what responsibilities the coalition has, and how we as a group, a member services group, don't burden one town with the actions or choices of another. So, you have to bear in mind, this is Canaan Community Power. It's your community power aggregation, as we call it. The coalition is really just the organization that assists you in this, but it's your plan. Yes, sir.
If we give the select board the choice of joining the plan, do they also have the choice of withdrawing the community?
Unjoining the plan? Yes. So up until such point, and again, it's a nuanced point. I touched on the broker model, for example. Within this document, we choose to write it in a way that we know passes muster with the Public Utilities Commission. It checks all the boxes on that. But it also leaves optionality for you, the town of Canaan, to move forward with community power in another way. You could make a decision to move with that broker model, for example, or any other model that may emerge over time. This has, this will exist, and once it's approved by the PUC, will be yours to keep and evolve as time moves on. Until such time as you actually approve, your select board actually approves a launch of community power, the town can step out of the program and step away from the coalition at any time, with no restrictions. Those contracts I've just spoken about do have clauses to do with termination, and that is termination of the whole plan, the whole community deciding to step away and step out. I would say, before I explain those, that prior and always within the community power program, the individual ratepayers have the right to step out and in and out again of the program at will, at no cost and no penalty. So anybody can take their own action. The town has to take action in a more unified fashion. You're being asked to vote in a majority at your legislative session, at your town meeting, in favor of this. If you wanted to step out of the program, it would need to be some, universal buy-in to do that. The select board is certainly empowered to express its will to terminate a program, but I think, and we haven't finished the plan, but typically the wording is there would have to be some universal town vote to take that step. Once a termination request is made, we have some language that is just written to cover all future perceived eventualities. And what I mean by that is you can't just sort of pick up your toys and go home, because what's happened in reality is that we've gone through a fairly long process that we've already embarked partially on, of understanding how much power the ratepayers of Canaan require. And then once the select board of Canaan has authorized us to get on board of a launch, there's many steps where we go and procure that power, and it's locked in. And so obviously if somebody then said, I don't want that power anymore, the coalition would be left holding the bag. And what we don't want to do, because you wouldn't want the reverse to happen, we would have to have an unwinding of those contracts. Now, if the markets are heading one way, unwinding a contract is thank you very much, we'll take it back and we'll sell it off to somebody else at a higher price, and we're all happy, and it could happen lickety split. If it was the inverse and rates were lower, and putting it out on the market immediately would cause harm to the overall coalition, then it would have to be a somewhat longer process. What we say in the contract is that it can't be more than 36 months to get completely out of the program. What actually happens, and what is currently happening, is we're procuring power in and around these rate periods that I've just been talking about. So our sort of contracts are in the months, not the years. It may be that we will enter into some contracts that have a longer expiration date. So you can imagine that it's a complicated answer, because you have to come up with a whole bunch of circumstances for me to get more detailed than this. But the spirit of it is, A, with no disrespect, if you want out, we don't want you in, because we don't want anybody being forced into something that they're not yet now comfortable with. And we would do everything we could to exit. The notice to the CEO would mean that he would immediately action a plan, and the select board would be informed of that plan, and it would be a responsible unwinding of the fastest possible way, and all exposure would be no longer than 36 months. And within that period, everybody in Canaan, if it was a rate triggered termination and the rates had gone higher and people weren't comfortable, everybody has the right to step out immediately. So, there's those two things that it coexist. Is that a good enough answer? So just to keep moving along on the plan, because it's not much, but the next slide, please. 1 minute. That's just pretty people talking. So the electric aggregation plan, what is it? It is a document that brings the whole plan and the program together. So it introduces community power, and it introduces the goals and objectives of the town of Canaan. So your electric aggregation committee has been charged with looking at a plan that we've provided in a template version, and said, here's some of the goals and objectives of some of our other members, but they're totally open for examination. And I believe that your community has taken a fairly long look at this and come up with some of its own ideas. And the plan as it stands today is in a draft, but fairly advanced form. And then it just gets into the statutory requirements of the law and the Public Utilities Commission. And then there's a bunch of appendices that explain what the coalition's all about, how we approach net metering. I touched upon that before. Is anybody in the room a net metered customer? So I won't go into a lot more detail. I'm more happy to do it if you're interested. But basically, another problem with a third-party supplier is that we can't get the data that we need to compensate people who have solar or micro hydro or something for their production, their excess production. The only way that it can currently be done for many people is they have to stay on the default power of the utility, and the utility has they have the data, but they can't share it with us. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but we are intervening in the whole process because it's just something that's emerged over years. When net metering and solar power was in its infancy, the utilities just got together and said, what's the easiest way to sort of book this on our books? And then it comes back to socialization again. The crazy thing is we have to buy this power for all of our members. But we can't, if somebody in that town, somebody in Canaan was producing solar electricity in excess of what they were using, in physics, it goes to your friends and neighbors, just goes around the neighborhood. Theoretically, that should reduce how much power that neighborhood needs to import, right? That makes sense? Yeah. But up the road is this utility meter that doesn't recognize that fact. And that utility meter is how the utilities do the reckoning. So their best answer is that we'll put it all into this massive big bucket called New England and we'll socialize it. And so you all save money. It doesn't make a lick of sense. There is no reason for it from a technological standpoint. It's just that, again, unfortunately, the utilities have failed to invest in their billing procedures and their metering procedures, and we're stuck. What happened last year, because we have been intervening both at a legislative and a regulatory level, is that the Public Utilities Commission said the coalition's point of view is absolutely correct, and they instructed the utilities that it does not require further legislation. They already have regulation. They just need to abide by that. But you can imagine that didn't go down too well, and there's a lot of toing and froing right now. And this is not going to be resolved overnight. But we are making some progress, and it's another one of those bills that's going through this year's legislative session, and hopefully we'll have some success. Yes, sir.
Sorry to keep on asking, but does that mean if a person has solar cells and produces some of their own electricity, it probably would not make sense for them to join in the community
I would
power
endorse
program?
exactly the words you used, probably. Because that's why I said earlier, if you were a solar customer, you got this letter, you would one of these exceptions to automatic enrollment, because we would not want to enroll anybody and harm them. So we don't know that individual's particular circumstance. Now, certain individuals who had solar for quite a long time, keeping it simple, could probably still benefit from community power, but people since 2017, because they changed the way that the compensation process works, we can't get that data, so you can't get your rebates. So some do, some don't, but what we want to do is get rid of all of that and serve customers. We're in the business of promoting local renewables, and it's very irritating that we can't do more than we can, but we'll get that straightened out. So net metering, load serving entity services. Well, right now, we've only been operating for under 2 years. Eventually, we could get to a size and where we could buy our power directly from the wholesale marketplace. But until that time, we have to depend upon a third party who is registered to do that. And so load serving entities are those people. We're not quite there yet. It just explains all the relationships. Customer data protection. That is a very important point. Customer data security is paramount to us. We're in the business of making sure that we meet all of the privacy requirements, and we maintain that data carefully and appropriately. Next, and then the next slide. That was just that slide. I thought that was up there. And the next one, please. The purpose of the electric aggregation plan. Very simply, very much what I've just said. The plan talks about net metering. It talks also about electric assistance program customers. So folks who are on that program would still be able to be enrolled in community power and save the money, but they would still be eligible for their assistance through the CAP agencies and so forth. And apart from that, the plan doesn't commit the town to any defined course of action. And there is no commitment to the town financially. In fact, you're not allowed by statute to spend any significant amount of taxpayer money on the development or implementation of community power. So that's basically the plan. And I've just got a couple of quick slides about the coalition, and I'm done. So 2 more slides, because we've got the happy people. Oh no, we've got the about the coalition, and here we go. So as I said, we've been operating since April of 2023. The coalition was formed in 2021, and it is run by our members, all volunteers. We've reached 66 municipal and 4 county members, and representing, as it says, over 40% of the population and 180,000 customers. And that figure of 14 actually is the first year of operation. We had a new statistic come in late last year. We've saved people $20 million since April of 2023, and that's real numbers. That's how much those folks would have paid if they'd stayed on utility power compared to what they paid through CPCNH. And the next slide, please. This is an updated picture of where we were on the 1st of January. So all the ones in blue are our communities that are operating and providing power either directly or through a county program. So we've got Cheshire County and we've got Merrimack County, who are also operating a county program. We have Sullivan County and Belknap County contemplating doing that. We are not yet in any meaningful conversation with Grafton County. And the ones in red are the ones that have gone through all the process and are ready to launch when market conditions allow. And you'll find Canaan down in the green under the groups that are members, but they're still in the planning stage. And the last slide, please. So as I said before, our Community Power Coalition is a non-profit. It's a government instrumentality. It's subject to right to know laws 91E, and we operate in a transparent manner with a volunteer board, and they're all members of our respective member communities. The town of Canaan has a member rep and an alternate, and you have a vote, and there is one member, one vote. So it doesn't matter what size of town you have or city, you're all equal in the eyes of the coalition. We have a board of 20, that 1/3 of which turns over at our member meeting in April. Our boards, our committees are also all populated by our volunteers. And then we have staff and we have third-party vendors. We wouldn't have been able to launch without the expertise of national and international experts in power procurement, such as Calpine and Ascend. And so we have a group that we're running a lean organization, and we are served by professional third parties. And that's pretty much the end of the slideshow. I think it's just the Q&A slide at the end. So thank you all for listening. I'd be happy to entertain any more questions.
Monica, do we have anybody on Zoom that's?
You have just one.
Oh, okay. But nobody put in questions on Zoom or anything?
I'm off grid. So the idea of a community, I don't sell my electricity to.
No.
There is excess, of course. I
Do you-
really like the idea of selling it to a community.
Community power, yeah.
Power, yeah.
Yeah. Well, certainly for the folks who are still connected to the grid, who are producing that extra power, like I said, we're not in a position to provide net metering credits in the way that we hope. But there's another piece of net metering, which is these renewable energy certificates or credits that I was mentioning. They're generated by this excess production. It gets pretty weedy pretty fast, but a REC, as it's called in the trade, is actually representative of 1 megawatt of production megawatt. So that's 1,000 kilowatts. And so if you have even a small array, you're producing more than it's an overall production. It's not just a surplus. I should correct myself. So I have 9.9 kilowatts on my roof, and I create some of these RECs. Well, my installer was passionate about this, and he set me up with a third-party organization that does what's called REC aggregation. Unfortunately, the vast proportion of residential customers don't know this, and they're not set up to it. I get a little check and little is the operative word, but I do get a check every 3 months from a organization who take those RECs and they monetize them. If you don't do that, the utilities know about that and they will do what's called REC sweeping, which means that they take all those unclaimed RECs and put them against their obligations to meet our renewable portfolio standard. The net effect of that in 2023 is, if you remember, I had 24.2 as a number for 24. In 23, it was 23.2 or something in that range. But every year, so now we've gone to 25, they're going to the Department of Energy is going to take a look at 24. The Department of Energy look at 23 and 24. And because partly to do something like REC sweeping, they let, I'll say it this way, they let the utilities off the hook for almost 10% of their obligations because they're, well, that's all covered. And this is the sort of shenanigans that we are intending to shine lights on and change. And we have become a registered REC aggregator, so we can start to buy people's RECs. Now, I can't buy your RECs if you're off the grid. So I could, I'd love to have a one-on-one with you about what we could do. Hopefully your excess is going into batteries and not just into the ether. But, that's another conversation for another day. So there's a lot of exciting things we're trying to do. That's one example. Another one is, ironically, many of our municipalities were unable to participate in their own program because they were with a third-party supplier. Probably Canaan has a third-party supply contract. And it's interesting that our rates have typically been very attractive, but they're on a contract. But what the municipality needed is rate certainty beyond this 6-month volatility, because you're trying to set a budget to take to town meeting, and you need at least a year's fixed rate. So we've listened and we introduced just this January the first fixed rate, which is, I think, coincidentally also 8.9 cents, and that will run from January to December. And so our member communities who have launched, so Canaan isn't eligible right now, can buy into that program. And we've had over 200 accounts enroll just in a couple of months through our municipal membership. So that's a voluntary program. You'd have to opt into it, but it's one example of things that are coming, that we're trying to change a lot of this and give local control and, more visibility and a voice at the legislature and the PUC on behalf of ratepayers and not the utilities. Yeah.
Are you finding, you said 40% of the users
Mm-hmm.
are members of the coalition?
We need to be careful, as one of my British predecessors, Winston Churchill, was want to say, there are lies, damn lies, and then statistics. So we need to be careful what we mean by that. What we're saying is we represent 40% of the New Hampshire population, meaning that people in the communities that we serve total 40% of the population. Now, that isn't the number of people within those communities that we serve. The mathematicians amongst you will say 188,000 is not 40% of the population in New Hampshire, and you're completely correct. What we find is that about 70% of we can from our purview, we can look at meters. It's not people. So we know if it's a commercial meter or if it's a residential meter. We know what your tariff is, but that's all we know. So we report on meters, and we do a lot of reporting, I assure you, and analysis. And we're coming up with statistics that suggest, on average, our launched communities are seeing about 70% of their accounts are on community power. They're automatically 70%. Now, again, that is of all accounts, both commercial and residential. So the other side of the equation, number of accounts, is load. How many kilowatt or megawatt hours the whole of Canaan is actually consuming at any time? The vast proportion of that is on your commercial side. And so the largest number of accounts are residential. The largest load is commercial. So we're not serving 70% of your load with just 70% of the meters. So, but what we're finding is that, you know, the commercial customers, once they learn about our rates and stuff, are typically, you know, interested, coming across, and that's happening. And that's what we're monitoring to see. Again, other communities are trying to promote a higher level of renewables, because although people aren't forced to do that, we really, really want to see that. So they're doing an opt-up campaign, and we've got like a friendly competition going on the seacoast, where 5 communities who've been launched for almost 2 years now are all kind of duking it out to see who can get the most people up to the 100% mark. And it's very interesting. We track statistics in terms of opting in, opting out, and opting up. I would love to report to you that people have opted up en masse, but they have not. The best we've ever got is 5% of the population up to 100%. And that's actually either Lebanon or Hanover. I forget who beat who, but it's up there. And they put a lot of effort into it. They've also got their own mandates. I don't think Canaan has made a statement of intention to move to get to 100% renewable energy by 2030 or something, but that's what Hanover said. And, you know, they obviously feel that their previous determinations of things like that give them some agency to sort of push the envelope a bit. But, you know, everybody's trying to improve the statistics while not burdening folks that can't afford to be involved in that. So it's very exciting times. Opting out, we find 1 to 2% is an average. So it's a fairly strong proposition if you're not opting people into something that's going to cost them money. Opting up just shows how hard it is to get people to do anything. But, you know, that's why we're here, to make it easy for folks and also to be accountable.
I guess I don't understand how the commercial contracts, or not the contracts, but the members who run big businesses, how do they affect the residential?
They don't, is the short answer, in terms of, I mean, they, like I said, you know, enrollment of any account that's on a third party is a voluntary opt-in action, and a good proportion, particularly of the large accounts, commercial accounts, will already be with a third party supplier. So they would have to look at their contract and see if it's worth them. I mean, we don't have a contract because, you know, you can come and go as you please, which is actually interesting to folks. And that 8.9 cents is definitely very attractive to many municipalities. We're not really pushing hard to get into the commercial business space. There's a lot of competition. It's a very sophisticated and mature marketplace. And in fact, again, the largest consumers just won't be on default power because it's not in their interest. So they'd have to come across. You know, maybe down the road we'll have resources, folks who are focused on that. But right here, right now, it's the focus is on residential and small business, the folks that haven't been served, that haven't had these opportunities availed to themselves.
So at this point, we just have to wait for the town meeting to see.
Yes, or get out and tell all your friends and neighbors what a great idea community power is, and be there on the day to vote in favor of it.
So essentially, nothing will happen until town meeting and it's voted in, yes, we want to be there.
And then a
No,
town
it's
vote,
not. And then once that happens, the select board makes a decision whether to go with the coalition or do they want to, you know, go with the broker. And then, you know, it's, if the price isn't right, it won't launch. We will be in a delay pattern. So this is what we could be delayed until the next launch period, which it sounds like we would be. At this
Yeah,
point.
it would
we are,
right now.
because we're already
It
looking at
wouldn't
that.
work until, you know, rates change. And as I said, I'm not even sure what's going to happen with this. I mean, we've made statements internally that these rate periods have suddenly become ghost rate periods. That's actually what our risk management chair described it as, because it's like it's a false number. So we've said, okay, we need to decouple from this. We're not going to get sort of tempted into a race to the bottom. We would like to think that the existence of community power has made these rates historically low for a lot longer. all of the projections, or we would have been coming back up on the curve here. And I assure you, those communities that gambled with a long-term contract and the people providing that were also thinking that. And by virtue of how much they were able to, what rate they were able to secure, so was the market. So were the people that are paid to look out a year or two were saying, you can't sell these people a contract for less than 11 cents. Well, somebody somewhere has not been listening because it stayed down here. And we're being, I'm not in the business of taking credit for stuff because I need to be careful about that, but it's certainly a conclusion that many are drawing, that there's no coincidence between the existence of community power and the maintaining of historically low rates by the utilities.
Andrew, can you speak to, you know, in the plan itself, there are, we have, community power objectives. The first one, and we sort of prioritize them. The first one is save customers money, which is what, you know, they're always going to be keeping their eye on. And the second one we have is community resilience. You know, can you talk about some of the longer term programs that could be potentially coming down the pike that would help the customers in Canaan?
Yeah.
And what sort of goals, I mean, once they build up the reserves and what that looks like potentially for Canaan down the pike, once this program, the longer it's rolled out, these things will be hopefully.
Well, if I could read what you're saying,
Sure.
and then we'll interpret that.
Yeah.
So Canaan, under number 2, community resilience, Canaan Community Power will advocate for measures and projects that enhance our ability to maintain electric service at all times. Canaan Community Power will support local contractor training and education programs to lower barriers to the installation of new clean energy technologies and support projects such as backup power supplies, community microgrids on critical facilities, and efficient electric vehicle charging. And I do get people saying, does that mean we've got to be, you know, developing local contractor training? It's not, and the word support is there. The idea about this is a future that many of us are concerned about the status quo. The grid, the transmission grid is it 100 years? It's over 100 years old as a concept. It's based upon the idea of large centralized power stations distributing power from these centers of production outwards. And it, by definition, is inefficient. Line losses is actually something that we have to account for when we buy and sell electricity. We have to assume that we bought 2% more than we'll actually need because the rest of it's just gone up into the air. And that's just one example of the inefficiency of a grid. But as you know, that we have been developing independently lots of little local production on our roofs and so forth. And for many years, the utilities complained and said, you know, the grid's not built to go both ways, and it's going to cost us a fortune to maintain all this craziness. Why can't we just keep with the big nuclear power stations and all the things we make money on? So this is all changing, and it's being sort of bottom-up forced. The conversations around microgrids are a resiliency conversation. It's not a popular conversation to have at a utility because it's a loss of control. It's loss of ownership. So and this is getting over our skis by years, but, you know, we're in the business of supporting local community action. So all of this is in the pursuit of that. I see you talking about, you know, installation of new energy technologies. Well, you know, some of our communities have been talking about if we get the opportunity to develop local funding, you know, from the receipts from our electricity procurement, we might be able to build a program that incentivizes energy efficiency and the move to, you know, more efficient equipment like heat pumps. Well, one of the big problems with, you know, that is there aren't enough installers, you know, things like that. So, and New Hampshire Saves, which is something I used to work on before I was involved with Community Power, you know, is a program that is actually funded by all of you. The utilities take great credit for providing you with these rebates, but you've actually paid for them in the first place. We would like to augment that because they still, in the great state of New Hampshire, you get, I think, $250 a ton for putting in a heat pump. Well, the bad news is it costs you about $5,000 a ton to put it in. So you're only getting a 5% rebate there. In the great state of Massachusetts, you get $2,500 a ton, and a lot more people are interested when it's half the price. And that's one of the visions, you know, maybe we can help to inspire weatherization and improve, you know, a lot of people ask me, how can I save money on my electric bill other than joining Community Power? We have no direct control over the delivery side, but you have control over how many kilowatt hours you use, which is what determines the bill on both sides of the aisle. So if we can inspire people to weatherize their homes and be more energy efficient, then their bills go down. Those are the kind of ideas. Microgrids, I just want to stay a little bit out of that one right now because it's a whole conversation that I think needs to be, you know, at a time when it's becoming more real. But it's a concept to provide resiliency because we're all, you know, worried about the fact that if a lot of things that are happening outside of our state or our region that affect us, maybe we need to be more locally resilient. So that's the notion of that. Was that good enough?
Yeah, I just, what.
Would
the
you like
goals
to
are-
say something else
No,
about
I
what you
just,
thought about it?
That the ultimate goal is that instead of the money going to investor owners, that the reserves are going to be building up for Canaan and for Canaan's benefit and for programs that will benefit people here locally. And that, you know, that is something that is, we're only year 2 into the coalition programs. It's going to take a while to develop these programs, and also that there, you know, is right now happening with the coalition. They are at the legislature. They are in New Hampshire. They are advocating on the benefit of ordinary people to save money, to, you know, make these programs more helpful for consumers. So
Today we're lucky to have Joellen Courtney, a representative from Enfield, with us. And Joellen, I know, has been very helpful to Canaan moving through its process. Joellen, maybe you'd like to speak to the experiences of Enfield. I mean, you've had a report. We were able to produce our first annual reports this year for the communities, and how much money has been saved. Do you recall what that number was?
Yes, we were part of the initial launch in April of 2023, which was very exciting. It was a little, I don't want to say nerve-wracking, but it was very exciting. And a year later, we were able to save over $420,000 for our residents, which is a lot of money. And that comes to just under about $200 per, and I'm paying attention to, you said per meter. So I'll use that as, I had been using residents, but I think it is per meter.
Well, most residents have 1 meter, so that's okay.
Right, but you know, under $200 is a lot. It's significant, and that's for 1 year. So we feel really very happy and pleased, and the 2 representatives from Enfield, I'm one of them, and I'm on one of the committees, the Member Outreach and Engagement Committee, and that's probably why I'm here, because you're my neighbor and I wanted to encourage you to get on this. And the other representative from Enfield is Kim Quirk, and she's the treasurer for the organization. So there's opportunity for a lot of involvement, and Hope is your representative, and I think Chuck is the other. So we really encourage involvement because it is member driven.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Well, I thank you for coming out on a bright afternoon, and I'm delighted to be the first. I think this will be the first time I've come to a Canaan presentation that has not been adversely affected by the elements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
You're very welcome.
Every other time we've had snow.
I know.
Yes.
No.
Well, you're the only ones that actually
That's still
booked a
is.
snow day.